Most people who hear this story ask the same question. What mistake did he make? I understand why. It is a comforting question. It implies there was a clear moment, a decision anyone watching from the outside would have flagged as reckless, a turn anyone paying attention would have avoided. It implies the story has a lesson that sounds like a warning. Don't do what he did. Here is what he did. The problem is that Robert did not make a mistake. He made 3 repairs. Careful, logical, well-intentioned repairs, each one addressing a real problem. Each one made with the information available at the time. Each one the kind of decision a reasonable person describes to a spouse over dinner and gets a nod of agreement. And the 3 repairs, in sequence, destroyed the thing they were built to save. I am going to tell you how. On a Thursday afternoon, 31 months after Robert first sat across from me, I read him a number. The number was $983,200. His account had carried $1,847,400 when we first met. No market crash, no fraud, no catastrophe. 46 cents of every dollar he had spent 27 years building, gone. While he had been paying attention to it every single day. He looked at the number for a long time. Then he said the sentence I have heard, in one form or another, 37 times across 16 years of doing this work. He said, I was trying to fix it. That sentence is where this story begins. In the next 16 minutes, I am going to walk you through 3 things. The first is how a careful man, meticulous, systematic, 31 years without a missed contribution, can lose nearly half his retirement account without making a single decision that was obviously wrong. The second is the sequence. Because in this kind of story, the order of the repairs matters as much as the repairs themselves. Change the order, and Robert retires at 62. With everything intact. The third is an observation I have never delivered directly in a client meeting, because I have not found a way to say it in the moment that is useful rather than only true. I am going to say it here. Stay with me. His name was Robert, civil engineering professor at a university near one of the Great Lakes. 31 years in the same department, careful in the way engineers are careful. He checked assumptions, he documented decisions, and he believed, with reasonable evidence, that a well-maintained system would behave as designed. He first called my office in March, 11 months before his planned retirement date. His university had sent him a pension letter he did not fully understand. His financial advisor of 14 years had recently retired. A colleague wrote my name and number on a post-it note. Robert still had it, folded once, in his shirt pocket when he arrived. He brought the pension letter, annotated in pencil. He brought a legal pad, expenses listed in categories with subtotals, a column for fixed, a column for variable. He brought a thermos of coffee he had made at home. I watched him arrange these things on the desk before he sat down. I noticed he placed the legal pad directly in front of him, parallel to the desk's edge. Exactly parallel. I wrote nothing in my own notebook. I did not need to. At the time of our first meeting, Robert's position was this: a university pension paying $4,340 per month at age 62. A retirement account with a balance of $1,847,400. A savings account containing $41,200. A home owned outright. Purchased in 1991. Assessed at $388,000. Monthly expenses, $6,840. Documented to the dollar. On the legal pad. Not wealthy in the way that certain clients are wealthy. But patient, consistent, 27 years without a single gap in contributions. He told me, in the first 10 minutes of our meeting, that the number $1,847,400 was the record of that patience. Not a projection, not an estimate, a record. He used that word specifically. And I remember thinking, this man has earned this number. The balance was $1,847,400. He did not know yet what the next 31 months would cost him. The pension letter contained a revision. The university had restructured its contribution formula. The monthly benefit Robert had built his retirement around for 8 years was $4,340. The revised figure was $3,580. The difference was $760 per month. 20 years of retirement, unadjusted, $182,400. Robert processed this the way an engineer processes a structural miscalculation, not with panic, but with immediate intent to correct. He said, in our second meeting, that he needed to close the gap before he retired. I told him there were several approaches worth considering. He asked which was most reliable. I told him reliability here depended on timeline and risk tolerance. He nodded. He took notes on the legal pad. He said he understood. He understood the vocabulary. What he did not understand, and what I did not explain clearly enough, which is my part in this story, was the trap that the vocabulary was concealing. The trap had a name: urgency. For 27 years, Robert's patience had never been tested. Nothing had disrupted the plan. The pension revision was the first real disruption, and it arrived 11 months from retirement with a dollar figure attached and a deadline on it. When that happened, something shifted. Not recklessness. Robert was incapable of recklessness. Something quieter. The patience that had never been tested did not know what it was made of until the test arrived. And when the test arrived, the patience became urgency. That is the moment the portfolio became vulnerable. Not the brokerage account, not the roof, not the sister. This moment, the moment urgency replaced patience, was where the story actually began. Everything after was a consequence. But at the time, it felt like a solution. Pay attention to the sequence. Because I need you to see each repair clearly. What it was trying to fix. Why it was rational. And what it cost. Repair 1. 6 weeks after our second meeting, Robert transferred $380,000 from his retirement account into a self-directed brokerage account. A colleague in his economics department had, over the previous 3 years, generated significant returns through positions in 2 technology-adjacent companies. The colleague was not a schemer. He was a man who had been right 3 consecutive times and had developed, as people who are right 3 consecutive times often do, an unshakable conviction that his correctness was skill rather than sequence. Robert purchased shares in both companies. The repair closed the gap through growth. The logic, sound. From a certain angle. The cost, none. Yet, the balance was $1,467,400. At our next quarterly review, the positions had continued to rise. Combined value, $441,600 on a $380,000 transfer. Robert was not celebrating. He was presenting evidence. He said, "It's working." I told him 3 months was not evidence of anything except 3 months. He wrote something on the legal pad. The positions peaked at $463,000. $200. Then they corrected. 14 months after the initial transfer. The combined value was $198,300. A loss of $181,700. Nearly exactly the gap Robert had been trying to close. As if the market had read his calculation and decided to be precise. He called me when the positions reached $240,000. He asked whether to sell. I told him that was a question about what he believed about the company's future value, and I could not answer it for him. He said he would wait. He was still waiting when the roof failed. Repair 2. The contractor's inspection found damage accumulated over 12 years. 3 separate estimates. $31,400. All within 7% of each other. Robert had $41,200 in savings. He was reluctant to deplete it. He decided to fund the repair from his retirement account. I have watched this specific decision 31 times. I have watched it end differently in 4. The repair. Fix the roof without emptying savings. The logic. Preserve the liquid emergency fund. The cost. More than Robert knew. Robert was 60 years old at the time. 3 weeks short of 59.5. Below 59.5. Retirement. Account withdrawals carry a 10% early withdrawal penalty in addition to income taxes. Robert needed $31,400. The withdrawal cost $49,800 to net it. 3 weeks, $18,400. The urgency of a failing roof is real and immediate. The cost of 3 weeks is abstract and future. These two things will never feel equal in the moment. And that gap in feeling between what is urgent and what is expensive is where I have watched more portfolios dissolve than in any market event I have ever observed. The balance was $1,235,900. Repair 3. 7 months after the roof. Robert's younger sister. She had operated a landscaping business for 14 years. Her largest client, a property management company, representing 38% of annual revenue, had ended the contract. She needed $88,000 to survive the transition. Robert had always been the stable one, the one who answered when the family called, the one people trusted to tell them it would be all right. The repair, keep the family intact. The logic, the amount, is survivable. The cost, only survivable if everything else holds. He transferred $88,000 on a Wednesday. In November, she repaid $9,000 over 14 months. The business closed the following spring. The balance was $1,147,900 on paper. Before the second correction arrived the following March, when the remaining technology positions fell to $94,700. The balance was $983,200. 3 repairs. A gap that needed closing. A roof that needed fixing. A family that needed help. Each one real. Each one addressed with care and intention. And together, in that specific order. At that specific pace. Against a portfolio that had no margin left to absorb. One more rational decision. They took $864,200 from a man who had spent 27 years being exactly the kind of person who should never lose that much money. He did not know yet. He would know in 11 days. By that point, the question was no longer what would happen. Only when. I need you to hear what Robert said when I showed him the number, because it is the sentence I have heard 37 times and I have never found a way to prepare for it. The shift, and there is always a shift. In every story of this kind, a moment when the accumulated weight of individually survivable decisions becomes something the account cannot survive, arrived on that Thursday. He came in with the thermos. He did not bring the legal pad. I noticed the absence immediately. A man who had brought a legal pad to every meeting for 31 months. Who placed it parallel to the desk's edge? Who documented his fixed expenses separately from variable? That man had arrived. Without his pad, something in him already knew. I walked him through the position. I did not soften the number. In 16 years, I have not once found that softening a number protects the person sitting across from me. It delays the understanding, and the delay is not kindness. It is a debt paid with interest. Current balance, $983,200. Pension, $3,580 per month. Monthly expenses, $7,100. Age, 61. Original retirement date, already passed. He looked at the number for a long time. He said, I was trying to fix it. Not, I made a mistake. Not, I knew this was risky and I did it anyway. Not, I stopped paying attention. I was trying to fix it. There is a version of this story where Robert is the cautionary tale, where the lesson is, don't do what he did. Don't chase returns. Don't drain your account for home repairs. Don't lend to family. I do not tell that version, because that version places the failure in Robert, and Robert is not where the failure was. Robert did not lose his portfolio because he was reckless. He lost it because he was exactly as careful as he had always been, and the disruption arrived at a moment when careful, applied with urgency, was indistinguishable from harmful. That is the thing nobody tells you. Careful is not a fixed state. Careful applied to the wrong problem, in the wrong sequence, under pressure, can produce outcomes that careless would not. By that Thursday, the outcome was no longer in question. Only the timeline. I promised you an observation I have never delivered directly to a client. Here it is. I have watched the correction spiral, 3 repairs in sequence, each rational, collectively fatal, 41 times. In 16 years, I have watched it resolve differently. In 4. The 41 cases share 3 things. First, the client is always careful. Without exception. Not naive. Not reckless. Not inattentive. Careful. Robert had a legal pad. He annotated letters in pencil. He made his coffee at home before driving to meetings. Carelessness does not produce the correction spiral. The correction spiral requires a careful person, because only a careful person will construct 3 individually rational repairs and cannot see from inside the moment what the sequence is building toward. Second, each repair addresses a real problem. The gap was real. The roof was real. The sister's situation was real. This is what separates the correction spiral from ordinary financial error. In ordinary error, at least one decision is obviously wrong. In the correction spiral, all 3 decisions are defensible. That is why it is so difficult to interrupt. There is no moment of obvious recklessness to point to. There is only a sequence that makes sense from inside each individual decision and makes no sense from outside all 3. Third, and this is the one I have never said in a meeting, because I have not found a way to say it that is useful in the moment rather than only accurate. Robert spent 27 years mastering one discipline. The accumulation discipline. Contributing, allocating, not touching. The balance. He was, by every measure I have, exceptional at it. The number 1,847 $400 was the evidence. You do not build that number without genuine discipline. What the accumulation discipline does not teach, what it specifically does not prepare a person for, is the distribution phase, the years immediately before and after retirement, when the portfolio transitions from a thing you are building to a thing that must protect itself. The distribution discipline is different from the accumulation discipline in almost every particular. Different instincts, different responses to disruption, different definition of patience. A person who has spent 30 years mastering accumulation has no particular advantage in distribution. That is not intuitive. It feels like it should be wrong. But I have watched it not be wrong 41 times. What Robert needed, in March of the year he first called my office, was not a better investment strategy. He needed someone to tell him, before the disruption, before the gap, before the urgency arrived, that the distribution phase had its own logic, and that the logic was different from everything he had learned, and that the moment a disruption felt urgent was the moment the new logic mattered most. No one told him, including me. I explained the mechanics. After the sequence risk, the penalty calculation, the analysis of his sister's business margin, I explained all of these things in the meetings that followed that Thursday. I did not explain them before, because the question of when to explain the distribution discipline is, in itself, part of the discipline, and I arrived at the answer one client late. That is my part in this story. I have not forgotten it. Robert retired at 63. One additional year. Reduced load. By arrangement with his department, he sold the house and bought something smaller in the same city. Applied the equity to the account. Did not recover the full position. He recovered enough. Account. $714,600. Pension. $3,580 per month. No debt. Lives, by his own accounting at our most recent review, within his means. He called me 2 years after that Thursday, not about the account, but to say he had been rereading his legal pads. He found the notes from our first meeting, the pension letter, annotation, the column of fixed expenses, the circled figure, $1,847,400. He said, the plan was right. I stopped trusting it the moment something went wrong. I told him that was exactly right. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I keep thinking about that word, repair. Every decision felt like a repair. The brokerage account, that was a repair. The roof, that was a repair. My sister, that was a repair. I was repairing constantly. And I never noticed that the thing I was repairing was getting smaller. I had not used that word with him. He had arrived at it on his own. 2 years later, from a legal pad, I think about the thermos. A man who makes his coffee at home before meeting his financial advisor is a man who has always paid careful attention. That attention does not disappear. When a disruption arrives, it redirects. It picks up tools. It begins to repair. And sometimes the repair is what breaks it. This is what I have seen 41 times. This is what I have never found a way to show someone before it begins. Because the repairs feel like competence. Because they are competence, in every individual decision, considered alone. And because the accumulation of competence, in the wrong sequence, under the wrong pressure, can produce an outcome that incompetence could not have constructed. Robert is the most disciplined client I have ever watched lose money. I have thought about that for 4 years. I am still thinking about it. The next story I am going to tell you is about a woman named Charlotte. She was 59 years old when her husband died. She had never written a check for more than $400 in 40 years of marriage. Within 11 months of his death, she had fired 3 separate financial advisors, one of them with a written letter she had clearly prepared in advance. When she finally came to my office, she brought a manila folder, a list of questions in blue ink on hotel stationery, and something I did not expect. She brought the right question. What Charlotte understood about the distribution phase. Specifically, about what it takes to protect a portfolio. When the disruption is not a gap in a pension calculation, but the disappearance of the person who managed everything, is the thing I wished Robert had known before March. I'll tell you another one next time.